This morning, we are highlighting two pioneering women who've become leaders and role models. Condoleezza Rice was the first black woman to serve as Secretary of State, and Allyson Felix is the most decorated U.S. Olympian in track and field history. She's trying to say. They recently spoke at the KPMG's Women's Leadership Summit at the Baldasroll Golf Club that's in New Jersey, where they met up with Adriana Diaz. In a preview last week, Rice shared her thoughts on China and former President Donald Trump. They're now working together to help other women in their careers by prioritizing wellness.
Nobody ever sets out to actually be the first. I'll never forget a conversation with my good friend, the late Sally Ride, and she said, I didn't want to be the first woman in space, I just wanted to be in space. And so I think if you think too much about being the first, you won't enjoy the opportunity before you.
Enjoy the ride, so to speak.
Enjoy the ride, that's right, yeah.
The ride to the top wasn't always smooth for former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and track and field Olympian Allyson Felix.
I grew up in segregated Birmingham, Alabama, and if I had thought about barriers, I wouldn't be where I am today. My father had a very good way of saying it. Don't let somebody else's prejudice be your problem.
It's difficult to be the only one in the room, but I think there's freedom on the other side of fear.
Felix once feared losing her livelihood if she didn't hide a part of her truth.
I was training at 4 a.m. while it was dark so that no one would see that I was pregnant.
That's because at the time in 2018, she says her sponsor Nike would reduce athletes' pay if they couldn't compete, even if they were sidelined by pregnancy. She went public in a New York Times op-ed.
I went through that very hard time right when I was having my daughter, and just looking at her and thinking about the world that I want her to grow up in, I was absolutely terrified, but I deeply believed I was doing what was right.
Nike changed its policy, and Felix went on to found her own athletic shoe company, Seiche.
Here I am, ready to run for a brand that I founded,
which aims to support women, especially mothers.
You've long spoken out about black maternal health, most recently about your friend and former teammate, Tori Bowie.
I think it's been a really hard situation for everyone, and it's just highlighted that we are facing a maternal health crisis for women of color.
Bowie died in May from complications during childbirth. An autopsy reveals she may have had seizures stemming from preeclampsia, a high blood pressure condition that disproportionately affects black women.
The CDC says that black women are 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related complication. It's 80% preventable. What can the healthcare world do? And also, what can black women do themselves?
Women of color have to know that they're at risk. They have to know the signs to look for, their vision being impaired, swollen feet, headaches, the awareness, implicit bias training. In the medical field, in the past, black women have not been heard. Their pain hasn't been believed, and that just has to stop.
Health, childcare, and work are all contributing to higher stress levels.
In a new KPMG study, 91% of executive women report feeling an exponential growth in stress over the last 3 years. Is that something that you've observed or you've experienced?
Stress is a part of life, and particularly as you go up the ladder, it's going to be more stressful. And frankly, that's also true for men.
Dr. Rice, I can't imagine the stressful situations you've been in, especially in your diplomatic life. What tools do you use to manage and navigate stress?
I always found, first and foremost, acknowledging it. If you suppress it, it doesn't help. I always said to myself, all right, this is a stressful situation. And by naming it, I felt that I could deal with it then. And saying, oh, I can't be stressed, come on. What you can say is, I'm feeling stress, how do I manage that stress? And I think that's the most important thing.
Allyson, for you, what are your wellness practices?
Yeah, I start my day off with my gratitude journal, and that really just centers me. Started playing a little bit of tennis. Sometimes when my days get absolutely crazy, sometimes wellness looks like sitting in my car for a little bit longer, doing a little bit of meditation before I walk into the house.
Both say practicing wellness has been key to their success. For Rice, that means playing piano and making time to unplug.
Even when I was secretary, I would take the time between noon and 7 o'clock on Sundays, and I would say, now if you have to call me, do, but if you don't, let me watch football on TV.
Her love of football is more than just a hobby. She's also part owner of the Denver Broncos.
My father, who's gone to heaven, thinks I finally got an important job, you know.
It's about time.
Yeah. My dad, he was a football coach when I was born, and some of my happiest memories are watching football with my dad. So I can remember at 6 or 7 years old, Condoleezza, what are they doing? Daddy, that's a trap block, or they're setting up a screen, Daddy.
Lifelong memories Felix also wants to impart to her daughter.
I try to speak life into her. We do affirmations. I just want her to be really confident because I know at some point she'll have to take on her own battles, and I want her to be really ready for that.
What was today's affirmation?
We haven't done it yet, but I think it's going to be challenges help me grow.
Thank you, Adriana Diaz. Don't we like Condi's dad? Don't let someone else's prejudice be your problem. Or Allison, there's freedom on the other side of free air. Love that.